In 1804, the locomotive pen-y-darren, built by pioneer Richard Trevithick, became the first locomotive to haul a train. However, a couple of years before this, Trevithick developed his Coalbrookdale design. While some are unsure whether it was ever actually built, it is commonly credited as the world's first steam railway locomotive. Newman Miniatures is proud to announce that we have released several models of the Coalbrookdale engine in N and 00 scales. This video will be looking at two of our N-gauge versions. Our first N-gauge Coalbrookdale engine is very much intended for static display only, whether in its own right or as the load on a truck. Here we have it as printed prior to any filing, cleaning, etc. And as you can see, it's been produced inside a protective box for transporting. So all that really needs doing with this model is removing it from this casing. It's very simple. First we take some snips. These are the ones which I generally prefer using. And all we need to do, if I actually get my fingers around this correctly, is snip away at the case, separating it from the bottom. That's half of it done. And 1, 2, 3. The frame, have to be a little bit careful with. There we go, and simply lifts away, revealing the engine inside. Now we put that to one side. Now all that needs doing is the locomotive itself is trimmed from the base point. 1, 2, 3, 4 to have the locomotive. And if we then turn the base part up the other way, you'll see that it is a piece of plateway track which the model can go straight on for display. All it now needs is cleaning up, painting, and the model is complete. This second N-gauge Coalbrookdale engine is a very different model, however. Here we have all the primary sections of the same model as the static, however as individual components, with the intention of building a working model. Now, to remind everyone, this is N-gauge I'm talking about, therefore here is a ruler for scale, showing just how small these components really are. The first thing to do is to separate this into most of the individual components. The pilot holes have already been drilled out, have already been printed, I should say. However, it is best to very gently by hand drill them out using a 0.55mm drill bit. Now here you can see a couple of the pieces have already been removed from the sprue, and we have as examples one of the unpowered driving wheels, one of the powered driving wheels, the main crank, the flywheel, and you'll of course note we have the main boiler unit. The most important thing of all, if I turn this round, is you will see that connecting the boiler itself and the main piston rod support is a piece of sprue here. Do not remove that until later on in the build, as it is at the moment the main structural member holding that part together, and there is a risk that it could break elsewise. Now here we have most of the components removed from the sprues. You'll see that some parts of the sprue have been kept on to aid in painting. Now the next step is to create the axles. Now for this I'm using 0.5mm pins such as this, and these can be trimmed and fit straight in. So for example, here we have, you have to take my word for it because it's rather small, one of the driving wheels with half a axle added. It's simply a case of push fitting in like so. These can then be tested, and the first stage of construction is then complete. So with the wheels temporarily placed underneath the boiler unit, so you get an idea of the first stage, the next point is to use lead to add some weight. This can be added via a little hole at the very bottom of the engine. Once that's done, the next point is painting, and then we're at the point where we start assembling the locomotive itself. As you can see, the parts are now painted, and so we're on to the next stage. Now, as you can see, I've already partially started this, so I've made sure that the cylinder, where the piston rod goes in, was cleared of wax, and I have slotted in the piston rod just here. I've also added part of the way in the 2 slide bars and slotted in the bar. Now what we're going to do is put a little bit of glue on each end, slot the slide bars all the way in, attach the piston rod to the beam, and then we can remove this sprue up the top. So that's what I'm going to start with now. So if we get a little bit of glue, and a trusty pin. Only the smallest amount of glue is actually necessary. You don't need to gum it up by any stretch of the imagination. So now this slots through. Just like that. If we repeat that for the other side. Push that back. Come on. A little stiffer this one, but there we go. And lastly, probably easiest to do this on end. Or not. I think we're almost there. There we go. So we have a unit that goes back and forth. With the slide bar and beam in place, as you can see, I've added a few little pieces of 1/2 mm strip, just carefully applied to hold the wheels in place. So we now finally have a rolling chassis. From here, the next stage is to apply the final parts. So if we start with the crank gear, this slots in here. We then take the flywheel and push it on the other side. The most important thing here is to ensure that the hole for the coupling rod lines up with the relevant one on the crank itself. So if we hold the crank vertically, push it to begin with, align it loosely by eye, and gently push together. There we go. We get the next stage like that. Then lastly, we take the gear wheel, slot it into place. Whoops. It is a little bit fiddly. And then we pin that into place. The model is nearly complete. The final construction stage for this model is making and fitting the coupling rods. Now for this I'm using 1mm plastic, as you can see here, in strip form, and this is cut to measurement with holes drilled in each end. Now these measurements, as with all the various axles, are on the sales page for this particular model. These are then pinned in using the heads from various of the 0.5mm pins, ultimately creating what looks like this. Now this is rather fiddly, so you'll forgive me for not showing it on camera. This one did take a little while, but it's something which is not difficult, it simply requires patience. Once the two are put together, all that's left is some final fine-tuning, just to make sure that everything is properly square and turns freely. So with a bit of fine-tuning, just to make sure that everything was working decently, we now have the finished of the working models. You can see that the track has been painted up in front of it, and to demonstrate that this is indeed a working model, I'm just going to gently move the engine backwards and forwards using a bit of a stick, and fortunately, of course, there was a small amount of friction in something so small, but nonetheless the effect is quite convincing. And so we have it, the final models, static and operational, Trevithick's Coalbrookdale engine in N-gauge. The double O gauge version is essentially the same as that for the N-gauge operational one, and can be built as a static model or to function in the same manner as this particular example. I hope that this has been of interest, I hope it has been of use, and in going to the very earliest days of the railways, it shows just how far our railways have come, but by the same token, just how far we can push our model making. Thank you for watching.